You were there when the wall came down in Berlin, and at first you didn't believe it. Because things like this don't happen in real life. Not in your life. Not in your city. Not on a random night that started like any other night, with people tired from work, lights flickering in old apartments, and a cold wind moving through streets that had learned how to stay quiet. For years, the wall was just there. Not as a symbol. Not as history. Just as reality. Concrete. Barbed wire. Guards. Rules that didn't need to be explained because everyone already understood what happens when you cross them. You stopped thinking about it. That was the strange part. People don't think about walls they grow up with. They think about groceries, about rent, about whether tomorrow will feel the same as today. The wall was always in the background of those thoughts, like a shadow that never moved. And then that night came. It didn't start with chaos. It started with confusion. A rumor first. Quiet voices in kitchens. Radios turned slightly louder than usual. Someone saying something about travel permissions, about borders, about new rules. But nobody trusted rumors anymore. Not here. Not after so many years of being told things would change, and then they didn't. You remember sitting there, thinking it would pass like everything else. Another misunderstanding. Another political mistake that would be corrected by morning. But then the phone calls started. Short, breathless, turn on the TV. Nothing else, just that. And when you did, you saw it. A man at a press conference. Tired eyes. Papers in front of him. Reading in a way that didn't sound rehearsed. Almost uncertain. As if he was discovering the words at the same time as everyone else. And then the sentence. Something about travel. About immediate effect. About openings. At first, you didn't process it. Nobody did. Because your brain doesn't accept reality changes instantly. It tests them. It rejects them. It looks for mistakes. People around you started laughing nervously. Not joy. Not yet. More like disbelief wearing the shape of laughter. Someone said, "Did he just say the border is open?" And that was the moment everything fractured. Because if it was true, then everything you had learned about limits, about separation, about what is possible in this world was suddenly negotiable. The streets didn't explode immediately. They shifted. You walked outside because staying inside suddenly felt wrong, like being trapped in the wrong chapter of a book that was being rewritten in real time. And you saw others doing the same. Doors opening. People stepping out in coats and slippers. Some still holding cigarettes. Some not even fully dressed. Nobody prepared. Nobody informed. Just pulled by something invisible. And then you started walking too. Toward the border. Not because you were sure, but because everyone else was moving in that direction and stillness felt like ignorance. The city was different already. Not physically. Emotionally. That's the only way to describe it. The air felt suspended, like the world was waiting to confirm whether it was real or not. You remember hearing footsteps that sounded too fast, too uneven, like people were trying to outrun their own doubt. And then you saw it. The wall. It didn't look different. That was the strangest part. Same concrete, same height, same cold surface that had never cared about anyone looking at it. But now it was surrounded. People were gathering like water filling a space that had suddenly lost its shape. And there were guards. You remember that clearly, because nobody knew what they were supposed to do either. They stood there in uniforms that suddenly felt too heavy, too old, like costumes from a story that was no longer being told correctly. Some of them avoided eye contact. Some of them looked just as confused as everyone else. And the crowd kept growing. Someone shouted a question. No clear answer came back. Then another person shouted louder. Still nothing certain. It was like watching a system fail in real time, except the system was not machines or code. It was belief, and belief was collapsing faster than anyone could control. Then the first person climbed. You don't remember who it was. That detail was lost almost immediately. Because what matters in moments like this is not identity. It's permission. One person climbs, and suddenly the question changes from "is this allowed?" to "why am I not doing it too?" And then it happens again. And again. People helping each other up. Hands reaching down. Hands pulling up. No strategy. No organization. Just instinct. You remember your own hesitation. That strange gap between watching and participating. A gap filled with everything you were taught: consequences, danger, history, fear. But that night, fear was weaker than curiosity. So you climbed. The concrete was cold under your hands, rough in a way that felt almost indifferent. And when you reached the top, you didn't feel victory. You felt silence, because on the other side there were people, waiting, looking up, not soldiers, not enemies, just people, exactly like you. And for a moment, nobody moved. Nobody knew what to do with this proximity that had been impossible for so long. Then someone reached up, and someone reached down. And the first touch happened like an accident that the world had been avoiding for decades. And suddenly there was noise. Not violence, not destruction. Something else, something closer to breaking. People crying without understanding why they were crying. Laughing at the same time. Shouting names that had been spoken only in private for years. Strangers hugging like they had been separated mid-sentence. You remember the sound most of all. Not one sound. Many. Overlapping. Conflicting. Human. The wall was still there. But it wasn't the wall anymore. It had become something else. A surface people were standing on. Sitting on. Leaning against while trying to process what was happening to their lives in real time. And you realized something that didn't fully arrive as a thought. It arrived as a feeling. That the world you had known was not permanent. That it had only looked permanent because everyone agreed not to test it. And now that agreement was gone. Time itself felt unstable. Minutes didn't behave normally. They stretched. They collapsed. People kept saying, "Is this real?" Like repeating the question might stabilize reality. But nothing stabilized it. Because reality had already moved on without asking permission. You stayed there for a long time. Long enough that night stopped feeling like night. Long enough that exhaustion replaced shock. Long enough that the idea of separation between before and after became the only structure left. And at some point, you looked around and realized nobody was the same person they were a few hours earlier. Not because they changed, but because something they believed in had disappeared. And when belief disappears, people don't know what to do with themselves. The wall would still exist physically for a while, but that didn't matter anymore. Because what fell that night was not concrete. It was certainty. And you were there. Not watching history from a distance. Not reading about it later. You were inside the moment where history stopped behaving like history and started behaving like something alive. Something breaking. Something opening. Something that could never fully close again.